Well, definitely, and it has been a concern in terms of wage hikes, because it has been delayed by TCS. Now, in quarter four, it did give an indication that it might be difficult for the company to do wage hikes in quarter one, and that's largely played out. But we wanted to just take a perspective of what's happened with the other companies as well in this particular time frame. So the wage hikes for TCS is largely undecided of when it will happen, and this is big because the company has been one of the most consistent companies in terms of both wage hikes as well as promotions within the company. So while it is common for the industry to delay the wage hikes by a few months or quarters, for TCS, it was one of the key aspects. Now, that has been delayed by this in this particular time frame, and they have mentioned that they will look at the demand scenario as well as the uncertainty because of tariffs that's caused this impact. And let's look at also Infosys as well, because that was the other one we've compared with the other IT players. They've delayed the wage hike for FY24 and they announced it in FY25 specifically. In wage hikes came after roughly about 15 months of stagnation as well. But let's take all these points forward with our guest as well and talk more about this. Mahantesh Sabarad, who's the partner EIP India, as well as an independent expert who's joining in. Mahantesh, a very good afternoon to you and thanks so much for joining in. Essentially about this delay in wage hikes, we've not seen that from TCS as until now in this particular year, and that's based on what they've highlighted as demand scenario among other issues. How do you view the comments by the management essentially in terms of wage hikes which have been deferred? They've also done a headcount addition of 5,000 people in this particular time frame. So how do you view all these couple of aspects in terms of the wage hikes for its employees?
Okay, firstly, let's look at TCS's business itself, why they have been so, hung up about the employee costs. It's the first time that we are seeing after 5 years post-COVID that the year-on-year business has declined, year-on-year revenues have actually declined. Now, this is quite shocking when it comes to TCS. And the second aspect is in such a declining revenue phase, if you look at the employee cost as a percentage to the overall revenue, uh, they have shot up quite a bit. In fact, TCS used to have this under control somewhere around that 54-55% of revenues as employee costs in the past. That has now surged to about 59.5%. In fact, last year, quarter one, it was 59.45. This time around, it's barely 59.2% or thereabouts. So that tells you there is a 3 percentage points kind of cost increase, partly due to the business itself declining or growing very slow, and partly because the employee headcount base has sort of remained static or marginally growing.
Okay. So, Mantesh, taking this aspect into consideration, how do you see it moving from here on for IT companies as a whole? Because we've spoken about TCS. If you talk about Infosys as well, they actually went ahead and delayed their wage hike for FY24. In fact, announced it only in Jan 2025. So there was a period of almost 15 months of stagnation coming in at Infosys as well. I think Wipro, the last wage hike came in the month of September, and this was ahead of its usual cycle. Tech Mahindra, again, Jan 2025 is when they announced with a delay of 18 months. And if you talk about HCL Tech as well, Q3 of each financial year is what they announce their wage hikes. But with the ones where there is a delay, where business is slowing down, where do you think this is headed? Because attrition levels are also on a high.
So firstly, from a company's perspective, employee cost is the biggest cost item for all these IT companies. We just heard from that the wage cost for a TCS is somewhere around that 59% mark. So this has been the common theme or thread across all these IT companies. The wage cost as a percentage of their revenues is gradually inching up and is becoming very uncomfortable for most of them. So there is some urgent measure that is required to be brought in, particularly related to wage hikes, promotions, or perhaps even headcounts. So that is what we are seeing. We are seeing most of these IT companies deferring wage hikes just to curtail the overall cost, employee costs to the revenue line item. Plus, there is not much in terms of meaningful leverage available through, let's say, productivity increases or through outsourcing and so on and so forth that's aiding any of these IT companies. So purely from a financial perspective, it is imperative that these companies choose to bring down the employee cost from a percentage perspective to the revenues, especially when the revenues are either declining or slowing down
So,
big time.
So, Mantesh, my question over here is, what is the message that the companies are giving out? Because these are biggest names in terms of employers. Within that, if there is a concern from a demand perspective, you're talking about employee attrition, which is rising. There could be, supply side issues that could come in. Wage costs is a concern right now. And if all of this is not going to match, specifically with regards to the new employees that they will have to bench, how does this dynamic work? Because you've been tracking this space pretty closely since quite some time. Have you seen a scenario like this in the past? And if so, how has it been dealt with?
So, firstly, to answer the last part of your question, have we seen such a scenario in the past? Probably not. It's been a phenomenon that is happening only in the past 3 odd years, maybe 4 years if you were to stretch it. Earlier, the employee cost used to remain under control because the revenues used to be rising. Take TCS, for example. The last time they did a double digit year on year constant currency growth was in the year 2023, somewhere in quarter 1 2023 or thereabouts. So um, it's been like 3 years. I'm talking of fiscal year FY23 quarter 1. So which means 3 years have uh, not seen any meaningful growth from the likes of TCS in terms of the revenue growth. It's all single digit. So from what we can see ahead is that uh, we will see the employee headcount actually remaining more or less static because you have new age tools available to these IT companies. AI tools are available that can improve productivity per se for in a situation where you have low revenue growth, and you don't need to bring in wage hikes unless there is a linkage to the productivity, underlying productivity coming in. As it is, NASSCOM has forecast only a 1% growth in overall employee headcount for the entire IT industry. That's pathetically low. In fact, we should be seeing a trend where there could be a employee headcount degrowth happening in the IT sector. That's where the startup system ecosystem should have to come up and absorb this excess that is happening. Today, we don't have a supply constraint per se from employees' perspective. They're fairly skilled. It's just that they probably aren't skilled relative to what the companies would want on a current basis. So therefore, there is a bit of training that is involved. But most of the employees will be trained in a manner of 6 months, in a matter of just 6 months. So I foresee that supply is not a constraint. Cost is becoming a worry. Rising costs will
True
can be
that.
curtailed only if your revenues outpace the employee growth. If that's not happening, you need to start retrenching.